What does it take for a country made up of more than 7,600 islands to defend itself in the age of great power competition? The Philippines is finding out, and the story of 2016 to 2026 shows a dramatic pivot from internal security toward maritime deterrence. Over the past decade, Manila has undertaken one of its most ambitious expansions of military bases and maritime infrastructure, signaling that safeguarding its seas is no longer optional, it is central to national survival. The urgency is real. In early 2026, reports highlighted accelerated construction at strategic coastal facilities in Palawan and Zambales, as well as upgrades to radar and naval support stations across the archipelago. These bases are not just concrete and barbed wire. They are the backbone of the country's ability to monitor, respond, and project presence in its own waters. Imagine a Philippine Navy patrol vessel, once constrained to local waters, now able to rapidly move from the Sulu Sea to the South China Sea, fueled and supported by forward-deployed infrastructure. The difference is measured in hours, not days, a vital advantage in crises. Geography is destiny. With a coastline exceeding 36,000 kilometers and sitting astride the South China Sea, Sulu and Celebes Seas, and the northern approach to the Pacific via the Taiwan Strait, the Philippines is literally at the crossroads of regional security. These are not distant abstractions. They are active trade routes, contested fishing grounds, and potential flashpoints where naval incidents can escalate in hours. Protecting them is both a matter of sovereignty and of keeping global commerce flowing. Manila's approach mirrors lessons learned from other archipelagic or littoral states. Indonesia, for example, has long invested in distributed maritime bases to patrol the sprawling archipelago of the Maluku and Sulawesi regions. Vietnam, facing similar South China Sea pressures, has fortified coastal garrisons and radar networks to monitor Chinese movements. Yet the Philippines' strategy is uniquely shaped by its combination of geography, alliance dynamics, and historical resource limitations, requiring a delicate balance between modernization, sustainability, and operational reach. This decade-long investment is not just about hardware, it is a statement of intent. It tells both domestic audiences and external powers that the Philippines is serious about defending its maritime rights under UNCLOS, expanding maritime domain awareness, and improving the mobility and readiness of its forces. In a region where gray zone tactics, Coast Guard harassment, and strategic signaling are daily realities, the expansion of military bases is more than construction. It is a concrete shift in the country's strategic posture, and a signal that Manila is moving from reaction to proactive deterrence. For much of the post-war period, the Philippines' defense posture reflected domestic priorities rather than maritime imperatives. Military bases were chronically underfunded, naval and air capabilities were limited, and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, focused overwhelmingly on counterinsurgency operations against domestic groups. While this approach suited internal security needs, it left the country ill-prepared to enforce sovereignty over its vast maritime domain, including contested areas like the Spratly Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and the Philippine Rise, Benham Rise. By the mid-2010s, the strategic costs of this land-centric approach became painfully clear. Rising regional pressures accelerated the sense of urgency. China's expansive 9-line claims challenged the Philippines' maritime rights, while repeated incidents, vessel harassment, ramming, and the use of water cannons demonstrated Manila's limited ability to respond effectively. The militarization of artificial islands shifted the regional balance of power, further exposing strategic gaps. As a senior Philippine Navy officer reflected, "We were defending a maritime state with a land-centric force, a blunt admission that highlighted decades of structural neglect." The strategic reorientation that began in 2016 marked a turning point. Key inflection points included the full operationalization of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, which opened Philippine facilities to rotational U.S. forces, and the acceleration of the AFP Modernization program. The focus shifted decisively toward territorial defense, maritime security, and interoperability with allies, signaling a fundamental rethinking of the country's defense priorities. The base expansion effort was guided by three overarching objectives. First, to safeguard the exclusive economic zone, which spans 200 nautical miles and is rich in fisheries, hydrocarbons, and seabed resources. Expanded coastal radar networks, ISR platforms, and patrol coverage were designed to counter illegal fishing, smuggling, and gray zone incursions. Second, the initiative aimed to strengthen national defense and deterrence. By building infrastructure for rapid deployment, distributed basing, and sustainment, Manila sought to increase the operational cost of coercion without provoking escalation dominance. Dispersed bases reduce vulnerabilities and ensure forces can respond quickly across multiple maritime fronts. Third, the expansion sought to enhance regional monitoring and allied integration. Strategic choke points like the Luzon Strait and Balabac Strait were prioritized, allowing Manila to conduct continuous surveillance and enable joint operations with allies, turning Philippine territory into a hub for regional coordination. Palawan emerged as the linchpin of Western maritime security. While permanent installations on disputed features remain limited, Manila significantly improved resupply and forward operating capabilities, reinforced its presence around 2nd Thomas Shoal, and upgraded Antonio Bautista Air Base as a Western air hub. For example, resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre continue despite Chinese pressure, made possible by enhanced logistics and air support from Palawan. Northern bases now serve a dual purpose: monitoring the South China Sea and maintaining contingency awareness near the Taiwan Strait. EDCA sites in Cagayan and Isabela provide early warning capacity and temporary access for allied exercises. Recent drills saw U.S. anti-ship missile systems deployed temporarily near northern corridors, demonstrating the deterrent value of geography combined with forward-positioned infrastructure. Balabac Island anchors the southern gateway to the West Philippine Sea and supports patrols near Mischief Reef and transit routes towards Sabah. Manila plans up to 28 forward operating bases nationwide to enable distributed maritime operations, ensuring the southern approaches are continuously monitored and operationally ready. The expansion of Philippine military bases has been paired with a comprehensive modernization of technological and operational capabilities, reflecting the country's shift from a reactive land-focused force to a proactive maritime power. Central to this effort is the expansion of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance infrastructure. Coastal radar networks have been upgraded and extended to previously under-monitored areas, enabling real-time tracking of vessels and improved situational awareness across the entire archipelago. Maritime patrol aircraft now operate from forward bases such as Palawan and Antonio Bautista Air Base, while unmanned aerial vehicles supplement manned patrols, providing persistent surveillance in contested waters. These upgrades are integrated into improved command and control networks, allowing faster decision-making and coordination between naval, air, and Coast Guard units. Training and operational readiness have also evolved. Over 500 combined and joint exercises were scheduled for 2026 alone, reflecting a dramatic increase in operational tempo. These activities span multi-domain operations, including amphibious drills, missile defense simulations, and humanitarian assistance/disaster relief missions.
Yesterday, because I was like, oh, they're colorful. What are they?
Providing a realistic training environment for rapid deployment and joint coordination. For instance, the Balakatan exercises, historically focused on disaster response, now simulate complex maritime conflict scenarios, integrating air, sea, and land components to test interoperability, logistical readiness, and crisis management under pressure. Infrastructure modernization complements these technological and training efforts. Runways at key bases were extended to accommodate heavy-lift aircraft, enabling rapid deployment of personnel, equipment, and humanitarian aid across the archipelago. Fuel and logistics storage facilities were hardened to reduce vulnerability to attacks or natural disasters, and forward command centers were established to sustain long-duration operations in remote regions. This combination of advanced ISR, rigorous training, and resilient infrastructure ensures that the Philippines' maritime posture is credible, responsive, and sustainable, even in the face of gray zone challenges or sudden crises. The strategic stakes of the Philippines' maritime domain cannot be overstated. Roughly one-third of global maritime trade, valued between $3 to $5 trillion annually, passes through the South China Sea. The expansion of forward bases ensures continuous patrols of these critical waterways, providing faster detection and response to incursions or illegal activities. It also allows the Philippines to enforce UNCLOS-based rights more effectively, including safeguarding fisheries, monitoring resource exploration, and protecting maritime sovereignty. Strategically, these upgrades raise the threshold for potential adversaries. By dispersing forces across key geographic points, Manila increases the cost and complexity of coercive action, strengthening deterrence without resorting to aggressive posturing. The forward-deployed infrastructure anchors freedom of navigation operations, reassures commercial stakeholders, and contributes to regional norms of collective security. Rather than provoking conflict, this posture communicates preparedness, capability, and resolve, vital traits in a contested maritime environment. The decade-long base expansion delivers tangible national security and civil benefits. Forces can now deploy rapidly during typhoons, earthquakes, maritime accidents, or emerging crises, significantly reducing response times. The distributed layout of bases across Luzon, Palawan, Visayas, and Mindanao minimizes single-point vulnerabilities and ensures persistent coverage of strategic corridors, from the Taiwan Strait to the Sulu Sea. Modernized bases also serve as dual-use civil-military hubs. They support disaster response operations, provide staging points for law enforcement, and enhance connectivity in remote or underserved areas through infrastructure such as communication towers and transport links. By integrating military capabilities with civilian services, the expansion maximizes return on investment, ensuring that defense modernization contributes to national resilience, humanitarian preparedness, and local development, not just combat readiness. The Philippines' expanded maritime infrastructure also strengthens strategic partnerships and alliance diversification. Beyond its long-standing ties with the United States, Manila has deepened defense cooperation with Japan, Australia, and selected European countries, creating a network of operational collaboration, intelligence sharing, and joint exercises. These relationships enhance deterrence and build a web of credible presence across Southeast Asia without formal alliance obligations. Within ASEAN, the base expansion signals strategic autonomy. Manila demonstrates that it can secure its maritime interests while respecting regional norms, providing a model for other littoral states balancing sovereignty, defense needs, and great power competition. In the broader Indo-Pacific context, forward-deployed and resilient bases contribute to collective maritime security, ensuring that critical trade routes remain open, energy flows remain uninterrupted, and investor confidence in Southeast Asia is reinforced. By anchoring both national and regional security, these upgrades shows the Philippines' transition from a reactive coastal state to a proactive maritime actor with tangible influence in the Indo-Pacific security architecture. From 2016 to 2026, the Philippines transformed itself from a land-centric, underfunded force into a maritime-aware, forward-positioned state, capable of credible deterrence and allied integration. Looking ahead, continued investment in infrastructure, ISR, and advanced systems, coupled with deepened interoperability with trusted partners, will further cement this posture. In the end, the Philippines' expansion is not about militarization. It is about credibility, persistence, and reclaiming maritime sovereignty in a contested region where geography alone is no longer sufficient. If you found this analysis valuable, share your perspective in the comments. Your insights help deepen the conversation and sharpen our understanding of evolving regional dynamics. Thank you, and we will see you soon in our next geopolitical discussion.
Base po yan sa rekomendasyon ng U.S. Congressional Appropriations Committee na mas maging magtayo ang U.S. ng isang forward ammunition manufacturing site sa Subic Base.
Once the jewel of American military power in Asia, Subic Bay is now poised for a dramatic transformation once again. The proposed establishment of a U.S. ammunition and logistics hub in Subic Bay, described by some as the world's largest, represents a pivotal shift in U.S.-Philippine defense relations. The project, located within the Subic Bay Freeport Zone with its deep-water harbor capable of hosting carriers, is framed as the most significant U.S. defense investment in the Philippines since the Cold War. At its core, the hub's scale and strategic importance lie in providing forward-deployed logistics and ammunition capacity directly facing the South China Sea, just 1,100 kilometers from both Shenzhen and Taipei. U.S. leaders call it essential to filling the Indo-Pacific's gap in forward-stage munitions, while Manila frames it as part of its self-reliant defense posture, with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. bluntly asking, "Are we not already a target for China?"
Since the threat has grown, we must do more to defend our territory.
The geopolitical implications are immense. For Washington, Subic fits into the broader pivot to Asia, enhancing logistics and power projection across the First Island chain. For Manila, it reinforces sovereignty amid clashes at Second Thomas Shoal and supports a rules-based order anchored in the 2016 arbitral ruling. More broadly, Subic's revival is meant to counterbalance China's naval expansion and secure vital shipping lanes, making it a frontline in the US-China rivalry. But this move carries risks alongside benefits. For the Philippines, the hub promises enhanced security and jobs, while also raising fears of sovereignty, erosion, domestic instability, and Chinese retaliation. The country faces a delicate balancing act, leveraging U.S. protection and economic dividends while avoiding being dragged into a direct superpower confrontation. The return of Subic Bay is thus not merely the reactivation of an old base, it is the opening act of a new era. It embodies the Philippines' strategic repositioning, Washington's Indo-Pacific surge, and Beijing's growing challenge. Whether shield or lightning rod, Subic Bay's rebirth marks one of the most consequential shifts in Asia's defense landscape in a generation.
American military airplane. You are operating my military security airplane. Please go away quickly in order to avoid long judgment.
I am operating with due regard as required under international law.
The revival of Subic Bay as a U.S. military logistics hub is no ordinary project. It represents the creation of an advanced ammunition manufacturing and storage facility within the Subic Bay Freeport Zone. Unlike traditional bases that focus on docking fleets or housing troops, this new hub would be specifically designed to ensure a steady and immediate supply of munitions for U.S. and allied forces operating across the Indo-Pacific. Its placement in Subic is no accident. The bay's natural deepwater harbor remains one of the few in the world capable of hosting the largest naval vessels, including aircraft carriers, making it an irreplaceable strategic asset for forward-deployed operations. From Washington's perspective, the project fills a critical gap in America's force posture in Asia.
And then additionally, we had the Maritime portion, which had us operating with Ashland and the Philippine ship Tarlac, conducting some maritime operations off the coast.
U.S. President Donald Trump once declared, "We'll have more ammunition than any country has ever had," a remark that captured the logic behind forward-staging munitions in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. House Committee on Appropriations reinforced this rationale when it directed the Department of Defense to conduct a feasibility study, noting the lack of a forward-staged ammunition manufacturing facility in the Indo-Pacific. For U.S. planners, the hub isn't just about Subic. It's about ensuring rapid, uninterrupted resupply in a theater where time and distance can determine the outcome of a conflict. For the Philippines, the return of a U.S. military facility at Subic carries both symbolic and practical significance. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has defended the plan under his administration's self-reliant defense posture policy, arguing, "Are we not already a target for China? I think what we have to be thinking about is protecting the Philippines." His remarks frame the issue not as an invitation for foreign entanglement, but as a pragmatic step to reinforce national defense in the face of mounting Chinese aggression in the West Philippine Sea. Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro Jr. has added that the project will not simply be a military installation, but will also follow a commercial foreign direct investment model.
I believe the original concept, although it is funded by the U.S. Congress, it will be FDI, so it's a foreign direct investment concept. We can envision a private entity going about it on a commercial basis so that they can hire people on a commercial basis. Depending on the scale, initially about 200 to 300 people, highly technical people. But then there are downstream industries. Of course, they will have to build access to port facilities. It will regenerate revenue on a commercial basis for Subic. It will increase our trade flows.
By doing so, it promises to create an initial 200 to 300 highly skilled jobs, potentially stimulating local industries tied to logistics, ship repair, and defense technology. The scale of the project highlights its importance. Historically, the former Subic Bay Naval Base sprawled across 262 square miles, serving as a linchpin of U.S. Pacific operations during the Cold War. Today, its location retains unparalleled relevance. It opens directly onto the South China Sea and sits just 100 kilometers from both Shenzhen and Taipei, putting it at the heart of Asia's most contested waters. Recent developments point to a quiet, but steady U.S. return. The U.S. Marine Corps has launched a pre-positioning program in Subic, and American entities have leased a 57,000 square foot warehouse to support operations. The U.S. Naval Research Laboratory has gone so far as to describe the project as the most significant U.S. defense investment in the Philippines since the Cold War. Taken together, these details highlight that the Subic Bay Hub is more than a nostalgic revival of a past alliance. It is a forward-looking project designed to anchor U.S. and Philippine security cooperation in the 21st century. Its scale, proximity to flashpoints like Taiwan and the South China Sea, and dual economic military benefits make it one of the most consequential defense initiatives in recent Philippine history. The revival of Subic Bay as a U.S. defense hub cannot be understood in isolation. It is part of a broader pivot to Asia or rebalance strategy that has defined American foreign policy for more than a decade. Initially articulated during the Obama administration, this strategic reorientation emphasized shifting resources, military assets, and diplomatic focus to the Indo-Pacific, recognizing the region as the epicenter of 21st century power competition.
Our treaty alliances, including with the Philippines, our enhanced defense cooperation agreement, when implemented, will bring our militaries even closer together. And we're especially committed to ensuring maritime security in the region, including freedom of navigation.
Subic Bay's reactivation perfectly aligns with this doctrine. It restores America's ability to maintain forward-deployed logistics and rapid response in contested waters, especially the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Unlike Guam, which lies more than 1,500 miles away, Subic Bay is geographically positioned at the heart of Southeast Asia, directly facing the vital shipping lanes and contested reefs that define today's flashpoints. This proximity allows the U.S. and its allies to cut down operational time, enhance deterrence, and demonstrate their enduring stake in regional security. For the Philippines, the renewed U.S. presence is inseparable from its own struggles in the South China Sea. The West Philippine Sea, the portion of the disputed waters within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, EEZ, has become a theater of constant harassment. Chinese Coast Guard cutters have fired water cannons, executed ramming maneuvers, and shadowed Philippine resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal, where the grounded BRP Sierra Madre serves as a lonely outpost of sovereignty. These provocations underscore China's intent to enforce its sweeping 9-line claim, which overlaps with nearly 90% of the South China Sea. Yet the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling in The Hague struck down these claims, siding with the Philippines and affirming that features like Sandy Cay, Mischief Reef, and Second Thomas Shoal lie within Manila's EEZ. While the ruling was a landmark legal victory, it lacked enforcement power. Subic Bay's reemergence as a logistics and resupply hub transforms paper legitimacy into potential operational muscle, offering Manila and its allies the infrastructure to sustain longer patrols, resupply frontline forces, and counter Beijing's tactics in real time. The decision also has clear symbolic and strategic weight in the context of counterbalancing China's rise. Over the past decade, Beijing has embarked on an ambitious naval expansion, adding aircraft carriers, guided missile destroyers, and nuclear submarines to its fleet. Parallel to this, it has militarized artificial islands in the Spratly and Paracel chains, building runways, radar stations, and missile batteries that allow it to project power far beyond its mainland. Subic Bay is the natural answer to this buildup. Situated at the edge of the first island chain, a strategic line of defense running from Japan through Taiwan and the Philippines, the base plays into a long-standing U.S. and allied strategy of containment. Control of this chain denies Chinese naval forces unfettered access to the Western Pacific, a critical factor in both peacetime deterrence and wartime planning. By upgrading Subic Bay into a logistics and ammunition hub, the U.S. and the Philippines are effectively reinforcing this first barrier, signaling to Beijing that any attempt to dominate the South China Sea will face an integrated and proximate counterforce. Importantly, the renewed American footprint at Subic Bay is not just about U.S.-China competition. It reshapes the entire regional security architecture. Southeast Asia is home to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, a bloc often divided in its stance toward China. Some members, like Cambodia and Laos, lean heavily toward Beijing, while others, such as Vietnam, align more closely with Manila's concerns. The revitalization of Subic Bay strengthens the Philippines' hand in Asian deliberations, demonstrating that Manila is no longer a passive claimant, but an active partner in balancing China's power. Moreover, the move bolsters emerging minilateral coalitions such as the Philippines, US-Japan, and Philippines-US-Australia groupings. These networks, while smaller than ASEAN, are far more agile in coordinating military drills, intelligence sharing, and joint patrols. Subic Bay's logistics capacity will serve as the backbone for such coalitions, transforming Manila into a regional hub of deterrence. The geopolitical reverberations also extend to Taiwan. Subic Bay lies less than 700 nautical miles from the Taiwan Strait, and any contingency involving Taiwan would require rapid deployment of U.S. and allied assets. From Beijing's perspective, the base is therefore not only about the South China Sea, it is about Taiwan. China fears that a revived Subic Bay will serve as a staging ground for U.S. intervention in a Taiwan conflict, enabling faster resupply of aircraft carriers, submarines, and marine units in a high-intensity war scenario. In this way, Subic Bay represents a dual threat to Beijing. In the south, it strengthens Manila's legal claims and military posture in the West Philippine Sea. In the north, it provides Washington with a forward edge in any cross-strait crisis. For Manila, this dual role raises both opportunities and risks, enhanced deterrence and security, but also the prospect of being dragged into a conflict it cannot control. In sum, the strategic return to Subic Bay embodies the intersection of local disputes, regional security dilemmas, and great power rivalry. For the U.S., it is a linchpin of its Indo-Pacific strategy. For the Philippines, it is both a shield and a bargaining chip in asserting its sovereignty. And for China, it is a direct challenge to its ambitions of maritime dominance. The future of Subic Bay is therefore not just about rebuilding a base, it is about redefining the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. The proposed return of a U.S. military hub at Subic Bay offers clear benefits for Philippine security. Above all, it strengthens the country's deterrent posture at a time when Chinese vessels and aircraft are intensifying their presence in the West Philippine Sea. By hosting a logistics and ammunition manufacturing facility, the Philippines gains not only access to advanced technology and military support, but also a forward-deployed shield against coercion. In concrete terms, this means faster resupply for Philippine and allied vessels patrolling disputed waters, greater interoperability with partners like the US, Japan, and Australia, and a stronger foundation for Manila's external defense strategy. Subic Bay's geographic position, within striking distance of both the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, ensures that its revival translates into enhanced situational awareness and responsiveness, making the Philippines a far less vulnerable target in any future crisis. The project also carries economic promise, much like the transformation of the Subic Bay Freeport Zone into a thriving commercial hub after the base is closed in 1991. A U.S.-backed logistics center could attract foreign direct investment, generate employment, and foster technology transfer. Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro Jr. has emphasized that the initiative will operate under a commercial FDI model, ensuring economic spillovers in the form of 200 to 300 skilled jobs during its initial phase, and potentially more as the hub expands. Beyond direct employment, the presence of advanced manufacturing facilities could stimulate local industries, from steel and logistics to port services and technology. Just as the Freeport Zone became a magnet for ship repair, tourism, and commercial enterprises, the reactivation of Subic Bay in the defense sector could drive long-term economic revitalization in central Luzon. Yet alongside these potential benefits are serious risks. To Beijing, the re-establishment of a major U.S. military presence at Subic is not a neutral development, but a provocation. It directly challenges China's efforts to dominate the South China Sea, where it has invested heavily in artificial island fortresses and naval modernization. As a result, the project could prompt sharper Chinese naval and air maneuvers near Philippine waters, increase use of coercive tactics such as blockades and water cannon attacks, and even economic retaliation targeting Philippine exports or labor migration. Far from easing tensions, Subic's revival could heighten the danger of miscalculation. particularly if Chinese and U.S. forces come into direct proximity during future confrontations. Another key concern is sovereignty. The closure of U.S. bases in 1991, following a Senate vote against a new treaty, was widely celebrated as a victory for Filipino nationalism. A moment when the country finally broke free from what many saw as a colonial-era dependency. The revival of Subic Bay in a military role risks reopening this wound. While the Marcos Jr. administration has defended the hub as consistent with the Philippines' self-reliant defense posture, critics argue that such projects erode sovereignty, making Manila overly reliant on Washington's strategic agenda. Opposition voices warn that the Philippines could become a pawn in U.S.-China rivalry, dragged into conflicts such as a Taiwan contingency that go beyond its immediate national interests. Domestically, the reactivation of Subic also raises fears of instability tied to social and environmental costs. During the Cold War era, U.S. bases were criticized for fostering crime, prostitution, and pollution in surrounding communities. The challenge for Manila will be to prevent a repeat of these issues by enforcing strict oversight, environmental safeguards, and community engagement. Without such measures, resentment could grow, undermining local support for the project and fueling nationalist backlash. Ultimately, the Philippines faces a delicate balancing act. On one hand, the Subic Bay hub strengthens its security, diversifies its economy, and aligns it more closely with allies committed to a rules-based Indo-Pacific. On the other, it risks escalating tensions with China, its largest trading partner, and rekindling domestic debates over sovereignty and foreign dependency. President Marcos Jr.'s assertion that, "Are we not already a target for China?" I think what we have to be thinking about is protecting the Philippines captures the core dilemma. The nation must defend its sovereignty without inviting unnecessary escalation. Walking this tightrope will define Manila's foreign and defense policy in the coming years, shaping not only its bilateral ties with Beijing and Washington, but also its long-term role in the evolving Indo-Pacific order. The proposed revival of Subic Bay as a U.S. military logistics and ammunition hub represents a dramatic return of history with a 21st century twist. Once the largest American naval base in Asia, Subic has transformed into a commercial freeport, only to now be pulled back into the center of geopolitics. The project's details, its location at one of the world's best natural harbors, its capacity to host advanced facilities, and its integration into broader U.S. force posture underscore its strategic value. For the Philippines, the hub promises stronger deterrence in the West Philippine Sea and economic opportunities. But it also brings the inherent risks of Chinese retaliation, domestic backlash, and heightened regional instability. At its core, the Subic Bay project is more than an infrastructure plan. It is a potent symbol of how the Indo-Pacific security environment has shifted, pulling Manila once again into the orbit of great power competition. It reflects both the urgency of deterring China's assertive maritime moves and the Philippines' decision to embrace a more active role in shaping the strategic balance. By hosting this facility, Manila signals that it is no longer a passive bystander, but a key stakeholder willing to bear the burdens of alliance politics. The long-term consequences will be profound. If managed carefully, Subic's reactivation could anchor the U.S.-Philippine alliance, reinforce a rules-based order, and contribute to stability in one of the world's most contested seas. But if mismanaged, it could accelerate an arms race, deepen mistrust, and make the Philippines a frontline target in any future conflict. The return of Subic Bay is thus not simply a revival of an old base, it is the opening chapter of a new era in the Indo-Pacific, one where the Philippines' choices will shape both its own destiny and the future of regional stability.
If you like the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues. The Philippines has just redrawn the defense map of Asia. From neglected frontier to strategic priority, the Batanes Islands have transformed from forgotten outpost into a frontline choke point in the great power rivalry. The Mahatao Forward Operating Base activated in August 2025, is now the largest Philippine military development in the north, built not just for territorial defense and maritime awareness, but as the spearhead of sovereignty in the Luzon Strait. This shift comes against the backdrop of the Taiwan flashpoint, where China's growing naval presence has made clear that Manila cannot avoid being a stakeholder in any future conflict. For the Philippines, the new base represents its strategic edge, part of a broader, comprehensive archipelagic defense that plugs Batan's directly into alliance dynamics with the United States, Australia, and potentially Japan. At the heart of it all is the Luzon Strait itself, a geographic choke point and one of the few deep-water passages connecting the South China Sea with the Pacific. Here, Batan's becomes more than islands. It becomes a tripwire, a place where any strike would inevitably escalate into a wider war. The future outlook is both opportunity and peril. Stronger deterrence and closer alliances come with the risk of greater Chinese pressure, diplomatic retaliation, and the constant danger of miscalculation. Yet the symbolism is clear. The Mahatao base is more than an outpost. It is Manila planting its flag in the contest for the Indo-Pacific, preparing for a war it hopes never comes. For centuries, the Batanes Islands sat on the margins of Philippine statecraft, remote, windswept, and defined more by the resilience of the Ivatan people than by the presence of the Philippine flag. These islands, straddling the waters between northern Luzon and Taiwan, were seen as a cultural treasure, but not a security priority. Their location, however, has always told a different story. They are a natural maritime gateway, a choke point through which ships, submarines, and traders have passed for generations. During the Cold War years, Batanes barely registered on Manila's defense radar. The Philippine military remained focused on Luzon and Mindanao, while U.S. bases in Subic Bay and Clark Airfield were viewed as sufficient anchors for deterrence. The Batanes archipelago, with its sparse population and rugged terrain, was left largely undefended, its cliffs, coves, and windswept hills more a postcard image than a pillar of national defense. That neglect began to shift in the post-2000. As China's naval modernization gathered pace and gray zone tactics became a reality in the South China Sea, Manila quietly recognized that its northern frontier was no longer a backwater. The Philippine Navy and Marines began rotating small contingents into Batanes, testing the waters of forward presence. A turning point came in 2018, when the Philippine military and U.S. Marines conducted their first joint reconnaissance missions on Mavulis Island, the northernmost tip of the Philippine archipelago. The exercise was symbolic but powerful. For the first time, Batanes was being treated as a strategic outpost, not just a remote community. By 2022, as the insurgencies in Mindanao declined, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, began to redeploy Marines from the south to the far north. These troops weren't preparing for counterinsurgency anymore. They were training for maritime domain awareness, monitoring foreign ships moving through the Luzon Strait, and rehearsing defensive operations in one of Asia's most critical sea lanes. Over the next few years, Batanes' role hardened from peripheral outpost to strategic front line. Analysts began to describe it as a vital link in the first island chain, the arc of islands stretching from Japan through Taiwan and down to the Philippines, long seen by U.S. planners as a barrier against Chinese naval expansion. By the mid-2020s, as U.S.-China competition turned sharper, Batanes was no longer a forgotten frontier. It had become a chessboard square of immense consequence, one that could determine who controls the gateways between the Pacific and the South China Sea. The inauguration of the Mahatao Forward Operating Base in August 2025 represents the most ambitious military investment the Philippines has ever made in Batanes. Built on Batan Island, in the municipality of Mahatao, the installation is both the largest and most permanent facility of the Armed Forces of the Philippines in the northern frontier. For decades, the Batanes group of islands was little more than a windswept afterthought, remote, underdeveloped, and strategically neglected. But geography has always whispered its importance. And now, in the era of great power rivalry, Manila has finally listened. Mahatao's emergence is not simply a matter of infrastructure. It is a declaration that the Philippines intends to hold the line in the Luzon Strait. The location of Mahatao could not be more critical. Just 120 miles south of Taiwan, Bataan Island sits directly astride the Luzon Strait, the narrow but vital maritime corridor connecting the South China Sea with the Western Pacific. This channel, particularly its Bashi Passage, is one of the most strategic waterways on the planet. It is the route by which Chinese submarines attempt to slip into the Pacific, the artery through which U.S. reinforcements would flow in a Taiwan contingency, and the corridor that carries commercial shipping between Northeast and Southeast Asia. By building a major forward operating base here, the Philippines has planted a permanent stake in one of the Indo-Pacific's most volatile choke points. Functionally, Mahatao is built for three intertwined missions. Its foremost role is territorial defense. Equipped with hardened shelters, radar masts, and logistics depots, the base is designed to host rotating units capable of deterring incursions and feeding surveillance data into allied networks. Its second mission is maritime domain awareness. For years, Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels operated in northern Philippine waters with little monitoring. From Mahatao, the Philippines can now close that gap, tracking ship movements through the Luzon Strait and asserting sovereignty simply by being able to see, record, and respond. Finally, Mahatao has been engineered with humanitarian assistance and disaster response in mind. The Batanes Islands lie in the path of the strongest typhoons in the world and sit atop volatile seismic zones. The base includes facilities for pre-positioning food, medicine, and relief supplies, as well as airstrips and docks capable of handling helicopters and transport ships. In this sense, Mahatao is a dual-use hub, prepared both for crises of war and disasters of nature.
This blending of hard security with soft power roles is more than symbolism. It is strategic messaging. Philippine defense officials have described Mahatao as the gateway for defense and disaster relief, a phrase carefully chosen to emphasize sovereignty without aggression. It reassures the domestic public that the base is not merely a fortress, but also a lifeline. It signals to allies that Manila is a responsible stakeholder in regional security, and it counters Beijing's narrative that the Philippines is militarizing Batanes under foreign pressure. Every supply warehouse, every radar mast, and every port facility at Mahatao serves a double purpose: deterring aggression while enabling relief. This duality makes it harder for critics to dismiss the base as provocation, and easier for Manila to justify its buildup to the international community. Mahatao also changes the internal balance of Philippine outposts in the north. For years, the northernmost sentinel was Mavulis Island, a rugged speck just 88 miles from Taiwan. Mavulis, manned by small detachments of Marines and powered largely by solar panels, has been vital for symbolic presence, proof that the Philippines had not abandoned its northernmost frontier. But it has always been austere and logistically fragile, vulnerable to isolation and unable to host significant forces for long. Mahatao transforms that picture. As a larger, more sustainable hub with robust supply lines, it can serve as the anchor that supports Mavulis and the rest of the Batanes chain. Together, the two create a layered defense network. Mavulis as the forward sentinel, Mahatao as the operational base that gives endurance and depth. The combination strengthens not only the Philippines' territorial defense, but also its credibility with allies who see Batanes as an indispensable piece of the wider First Island chain. The opening of the Mahatao Forward Operating Base cannot be understood without its regional backdrop: the looming specter of a Taiwan conflict. The Luzon Strait, which frames the Batanes Islands to the north, has become one of the busiest and most militarized waterways in Asia. Chinese Coast Guard cutters, maritime militia swarms, and increasingly, full-fledged People's Liberation Army Navy (PLAN) strike groups now transit the strait with regularity. Surveillance aircraft fly overhead, submarines pass silently below, and surface warships move between the South China Sea and the wider Pacific. For Manila, this is not a distant concern,
but an immediate and unavoidable reality. Any clash over Taiwan would unfold directly on the Philippines' northern doorstep. Philippine military leaders have been blunt in their assessment. In April 2025, Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP Chief of Staff General Romeo Bronner Jr., issued a directive to troops stationed in the north, instructing them to prepare not only for harassment or gray zone encounters, but for full-scale invasion scenarios. His message was clear. While the Philippines has no offensive ambitions, it must be ready for the day when conflict spills across the strait. President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. echoed this sentiment in several speeches, warning that the Philippines would inevitably be dragged into any war over Taiwan by sheer geography.
If there is a confrontation over Taiwan between China and the United States, there is no way that the Philippines can stay out of it, simply because of our physical geographic location. To understand how close Taiwan is to the Philippines, the large city of Kaohsiung in Taiwan is a 40-minute flight away from the capital of my province in northern Philippines, in Lawag. That's how close it is. If you think about it, if there is all-out war, then we will be drawn into it. And I assure you, with the greatest hesitation, but we will have to defend our territory and our sovereignty.
With Batanes just 120 miles away from Taiwan's southern tip, neutrality is not an option. Geography has made the Philippines a stakeholder in the Taiwan question, whether it chooses to be or not. The human dimension makes this urgency even sharper. Over 200,000 Filipinos currently live and work in Taiwan, forming one of the largest foreign communities on the island. In the event of war, their repatriation would be an immense logistical and humanitarian challenge, and bases like Mahatao could play a crucial role as staging areas for evacuation flights and relief shipments. Philippine planners have openly acknowledged that the protection and rescue of overseas workers must be central to any military posture in the north. Thus, the Luzon Strait is not just a front line for war scenarios, it is also a lifeline for civilian safety. China, for its part, has wasted no time in condemning these developments. Beijing has warned Manila repeatedly against deepening military cooperation with the United States, particularly the deployment of missile systems and advanced surveillance platforms in Batanes. Chinese state media have accused the Philippines of turning itself into a pawn of Washington and stoking instability in the Taiwan Strait. The more the Philippines fortifies its northern frontier, the louder the warnings from Beijing grow, reflecting the reality that Batanes, once ignored by both Manila and the world, has become a direct challenge to China's strategic calculus. The new Philippine base at Mahatao is more than just a local development. It is a linchpin in a broader alliance architecture that is rapidly taking shape across the Indo-Pacific. At its core is the United States, Manila's oldest treaty ally, which has recalibrated its military exercises and deployments to meet the challenges of a potential Taiwan contingency. The annual Balikatan exercises, once focused on counterinsurgency and humanitarian drills, have now shifted decisively northward. In 2025, for the first time, large-scale maneuvers were staged in the Batanes Islands, bringing the Philippine and U.S. militaries into rehearsal for a fight over maritime choke points and gray zone scenarios. The symbolism was stark. Balikatan, meaning shoulder to shoulder, now placed Filipino and American troops shoulder to shoulder on the very edge of a potential war zone. The hardware brought with these exercises highlights Washington's strategic intent. U.S. Marines have deployed some of their most advanced missile systems to Batanes, including the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS, the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, NMSIS, and the Mid-Range Capability, MRC, launchers capable of striking targets across the Taiwan Strait. These deployments are not permanent, at least not yet, but they demonstrate the Philippines' growing role in America's archipelagic defense strategy, which aims to deny China freedom of movement through the first island chain. In military terms, Batanes and the Luzon Strait have become a natural kill box, where Allied forces could track, target, and, if necessary, neutralize Chinese naval assets attempting to move into the Pacific. Beyond missiles and drills, U.S. Marines are working hand-in-hand with their Philippine counterparts to refine the art of littoral defense. Training has focused on small unit mobility, rapid dispersal across islands, and the use of coastal terrain for concealment and ambushes. Anti-ship missions, once a distant concept for the armed forces of the Philippines, are now being actively rehearsed. Philippine Marines, long accustomed to jungle patrols and counterinsurgency campaigns, are being retrained for an entirely different battlefield. One where small missile units can hold at risk the largest warships in the PLA Navy. Australia, too, has stepped into the Luzon Strait theater. Once a secondary player in Philippine defense cooperation, Canberra has dramatically increased its footprint. Exercise Elan, held in mid-2025, brought more than 3,600 Australian and Philippine troops together in amphibious drills with observers from Japan, the United States, and other partner nations looking on. Australia's participation in these exercises is more than symbolic. It reflects a deepening commitment to collective defense in the Indo-Pacific. With its own interests tied to the freedom of navigation in regional waters, Canberra sees the defense of Batanes and the Luzon Strait as inseparable from its own security. The strategic aim of these converging alliances is clear: to deny China unchallenged naval access through the Luzon Strait. If Beijing were to attempt a military operation against Taiwan, its ships would need to pass either through the heavily monitored Miyako Strait near Japan or through the Luzon Strait near the Philippines. By fortifying the latter with Philippine bases, U.S. missile deployments, and allied war games, the coalition is effectively closing one of China's critical escape routes to the Pacific. For Beijing, this tightening net is a nightmare. For Manila, it is both reassurance and risk. Proof of allied solidarity, but also confirmation that the Philippines now sits on the front line of a great power rivalry.
The Luzon Strait is not just another stretch of ocean. It is one of the Indo-Pacific's most decisive geographic choke points. Situated between the northern Philippines and southern Taiwan, it forms one of the few deep-water corridors linking the South China Sea to the wider Pacific Ocean. Unlike the narrow, heavily surveilled Miyako Strait near Okinawa, the Luzon Strait provides China's People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, with a relatively direct pathway for submarines, destroyers, and even aircraft carriers to break free of the so-called First Island Chain and access the open Pacific. In other words, whoever holds influence over the Luzon Strait controls one of Beijing's most vital naval lifelines. For the United States and its allies, the same geography offers an opportunity for containment. By integrating Philippine territory, particularly the Batanes Islands, into a broader network of bases, surveillance posts, and missile deployments, Washington can effectively monitor and, if necessary, choke Chinese naval movements. The strait's deep waters, while ideal for submarine traffic, are also predictable. There are only a handful of viable transit routes, all of which can be covered by Allied radar, anti-ship missile systems, and patrol aircraft. This transforms the Luzon Strait from a vulnerability into a defensive shield, where U.S. and Philippine forces can deny Beijing uncontested access to the Pacific. Batanes itself becomes the linchpin of this strategy. Just 190 kilometers from Taiwan, the islands sit directly at the crossroads of these critical sea lanes. Any hostile move against them, whether a blockade, a strike, or even intensified harassment, would not remain a localized skirmish. Instead, it would almost certainly trigger the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, MDT, of 1951, obligating Washington to come to Manila's aid in the event of an armed attack. This transforms Batanes into what strategists call a tripwire, a forward position whose very exposure ensures that any Chinese aggression would escalate into a wider confrontation with the United States and potentially other allies.
The symbolism of Batanes as a tripwire is as powerful as its geography. For Manila, reinforcing its presence there is not only about territorial defense, but also about deterrence, signaling to Beijing that any attempt to seize or neutralize the islands would guarantee international escalation. For Washington, it is a test of credibility. Failure to defend Batanes in a crisis would cast doubt on America's security commitments, not only to the Philippines, but to Taiwan, Japan, and other regional allies. In this way, the windswept, once overlooked Batanes archipelago has become a fulcrum of the Indo-Pacific balance of power. For the Philippines, the establishment of the Mahatao base and the broader militarization of Batanes offers both promise and peril. On the benefit side, the forward operating base strengthens deterrence by physically anchoring Philippine sovereignty in one of its most exposed regions. It gives Manila a stronger capacity to respond not just to external threats but also to natural disasters, with the Luzon Strait notorious for typhoons. It also deepens defense ties with allies like the United States and Australia, turning political promises into tangible deployments of men, equipment, and training. Yet alongside these gains come very real risks. Beijing is unlikely to accept this new reality quietly. Chinese pressure could manifest as economic retaliation, diplomatic protests, or intensified maritime harassment of Filipino fishermen and Coast Guard units in disputed waters. Domestically, Manila faces the challenge of balancing its need to assert sovereignty with the danger of being pulled into escalation dynamics it cannot fully control. For the broader region, the Luzon Strait is set to transform into a militarized frontier of US-China rivalry. Once an overlooked waterway, it is now becoming a potential flashpoint where great power competition will play out most intensely. In the event of a Taiwan crisis, the Philippines' role would shift dramatically. No longer a peripheral ally, it would become a frontline state, its islands serving as staging grounds for surveillance, missile systems, and logistical support. This shift carries profound consequences. The Philippines would gain strategic weight, but also find itself exposed as a likely target of preemptive Chinese pressure or strikes. The risks of miscalculation would rise, making every patrol, every radar track, and every military exercise in Batanes a possible trigger point for larger conflict.
For alliances, the trajectory is clear: deeper, more permanent integration. The United States is already preparing to pre-position advanced missile systems such as HIMARS and Nemesis in Batanes, while Australia has expanded its participation in Balikatan drills and is likely to pursue a more enduring presence in the north. Japan, while constitutionally restrained, has also shown growing interest in cooperating with Manila, particularly in areas like maritime surveillance, early warning systems, and humanitarian assistance and disaster response, HADR. If realized, this trilateral or even quadrilateral cooperation would bind the Philippines more tightly into a coalition of Indo-Pacific powers determined to check Beijing's expansion. Opportunities abound in terms of technology transfers, infrastructure development, and capacity building, but they come at the price of entrenching Manila in the center of a contest it cannot opt out of. In sum, the Philippines stands at a crossroads. The Mahatao base is more than just a military facility. It is a symbol of Manila's rising strategic importance and the heavy responsibilities that come with it. Whether it becomes a shield that deters aggression or a magnet that draws conflict will depend on how deftly the Philippines navigates the risks, manages its alliances, and balances deterrence with diplomacy. The Mahatao base is more than a local outpost. It is Manila, planting its flag firmly in the middle of great power competition. What was once a sleepy, windswept frontier has become a forward operating hub. A tangible statement that the Philippines will no longer leave its northernmost islands undefended. It represents not just infrastructure, but intent. A commitment to hold the line at the edge of Philippine territory, no matter how close it lies to the storm of US-China rivalry. From neglected islands to strategic choke point, Batanes has been transformed into a front line that could define the security architecture of the entire Indo-Pacific. For decades, these islands were overlooked by Manila, their remoteness rendering them marginal to national defense. Today, geography has pulled them into the spotlight. Their proximity to Taiwan and their location at the throat of the Luzon Strait make them central to any future conflict scenario. If war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, Batanes will not be an observer, it will be a theater. The Philippines now faces a difficult truth. Defending its territory in Batanes means preparing for a war it hopes will never come. By turning Mahatao into a base, Manila is signaling both resolve and realism. It cannot afford neutrality in the Indo-Pacific's most volatile corridor. Yet this new posture comes with risks: heightened Chinese hostility, greater vulnerability to coercion, and the constant danger of miscalculation. For the Philippines, the challenge will be to transform Batanes into both a shield of deterrence and a platform for humanitarian resilience, without allowing it to become the spark that ignites a wider conflict. Ultimately, the Mahatao base is a symbol of the Philippines' strategic awakening. It is a declaration that the nation is no longer content to be a passive player at the margins of the South China Sea and Taiwan flashpoints. Instead,
Batanes is now at the heart of the struggle over freedom of navigation, sovereignty, and the rules-based order. The stakes could not be higher. In defending its northern frontier, the Philippines is helping to shape the future balance of power in the Indo-Pacific itself. If you liked the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.
Ready!
What does it mean when a country does not host permanent foreign bases, yet suddenly opens 9 strategic doors to the world's most powerful military? And more importantly, why now? In early 2023, Manila and Washington quietly crossed a threshold that had been avoided for decades. 4 new locations were added under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, lifting U.S. access from 5 to 9 Philippine sites. No fanfare, no base building ceremonies, just a map that suddenly looked very different and far more consequential. Picture the geography for a second. Northern Luzon sits within reach of the Taiwan Strait. Palawan faces the South China Sea head-on. These are not abstract points on a strategist's slide. They are fishing grounds, runways, coastal towns, and supply routes that Filipinos live with every day. When access was extended to Naval Base Camilo Osias, Lalo Airport, Camp Melchor de la Cruz, and Balabac Island, the message was not theoretical. It was geographic. These sites sit astride the corridors through which any Taiwan contingency or South China Sea crisis would inevitably flow. To understand the weight of this move, comparison matters. Japan hosts large, permanent U.S. bases, fixed, visible, and politically entrenched. South Korea does the same, anchored by the Korean Peninsula's unresolved war. Australia, by contrast, favors rotational access and logistics hubs spread across vast distances. The Philippines has chosen a fourth model: strategic access without permanent basing. No flags lowered, no sovereignty ceded.
Left or right lateral limit is your individual target. So yung lateral limit,
Yet in practical terms, the United States can now pre-position equipment, rotate forces, and operate from locations that sit closer to potential flashpoints than almost any other allied territory. This is not a sudden pivot pulled from thin air. It rests on a long memory. The 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty established the alliance when Asia was still reeling from World War II. EDCA, signed in 2014, modernized that framework for an era of gray zone coercion, missile ranges, and maritime pressure. What changed in 2023 was urgency. China's activities in the West Philippine Sea intensified. Taiwan's security calculus hardened, and Manila reached a sober conclusion shared quietly across Southeast Asia. Geography does not allow neutrality on paper to function in practice. At its core, this expansion is less about America coming back, and more about the Philippines deciding where it stands in an increasingly crowded Indo-Pacific chessboard. These sites are not just runways and ports. They are signals to allies seeking reassurance, to competitors testing limits, and to Filipinos themselves, weighing security against history. The question now is no longer why the doors were opened. It is how this new posture reshapes deterrence, diplomacy, and daily life along the region's most contested waters. The U.S.-Philippines alliance is not a sudden convenience. It is a relationship shaped by memory, sacrifice, and shared threat perception. In 1951, with Asia still recovering from World War II and the Cold War hardening, Manila and Washington signed the Mutual Defense Treaty.
For decades, that treaty was not just ink on paper, it was a reality. American aircraft took off daily from Clark Air Base, and U.S. naval power flowed through Subic Bay, once the largest American overseas base in the world.
These installations brought security, jobs, and a visible U.S. footprint, but they also carried political weight and historical baggage tied to colonial memory and national pride. By the early 1990s, the mood had changed. The Cold War was ending, Mount Pinatubo had devastated Clark, and Filipinos were asking hard questions about sovereignty and self-reliance. When the Philippine Senate voted against renewing base leases in 1991, it was not an anti-American moment. It was a declaration of independence in strategic terms. The closures in 1992 marked a psychological turning point. The alliance would continue, but on new terms, shaped more by Filipino consent than Cold War necessity. What followed was not a divorce, but a quieter, more deliberate partnership. Without permanent bases, cooperation had to adapt.
The Visiting Forces Agreement restored the legal foundation for joint exercises, disaster response, and counterterrorism operations, allowing U.S. troops to come and go, but never stay. It was a model built on presence without permanence, familiarity without occupation. That logic deepened with the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. EDCA reflected a new reality. Threats no longer came as massed armies, but as maritime coercion, gray zone pressure, and rapid crises. Instead of bases flying foreign flags, the agreement focused on rotational access, pre-positioned equipment, and joint infrastructure inside Philippine camps. In human terms, it was a compromise, maintaining alliance credibility while respecting the hard-won lesson of the 1990s. Filipinos want partners, not landlords.
This is a JP, all right? This equipment is made to go.
This evolution explains why today's EDCA expansion feels both dramatic and familiar. It is not a return to the past, nor a break from it.
It is the alliance, reshaped by history, geography,
and a shared understanding that in the Indo-Pacific, distance is shrinking, and time to react is measured in hours, not decades. At its core, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement is a workaround shaped by history. After the Philippines shut down permanent U.S. bases in the 1990s, both sides needed a way to keep the alliance credible without reopening old wounds. EDCA does exactly that. It allows U.S. forces to rotate in and out, bring equipment when needed, and help fund upgrades inside Philippine military facilities, while ownership, command, and ultimate control remain firmly with Manila. No foreign flags, no permanent barracks, no transfer of sovereignty. In practical terms, it is access without occupation, presence without permanence. What makes EDCA politically survivable in the Philippines is what it explicitly forbids: permanent U.S. bases. Every activity happens inside Philippine camps, under Philippine authority.
That distinction may sound technical, but domestically it matters a lot.
It is the difference between partnership and dependency, between cooperation and control. When EDCA was first implemented, 5 sites were selected, not randomly, but because they quietly reflected the Philippines' real security needs. Basa Air Base anchors air defense near Metro Manila. Fort Magsaysay, the country's largest military reservation, supports large-scale ground and joint exercises. Lumbia Airport strengthens its reach into Mindanao, long shaped by counterterrorism and disaster response. Antonio Bautista Air Base faces the West Philippine Sea directly, while Mactan Benito Ebuan Air Base serves as a central logistics and air mobility hub. These sites told a story even back then.
EDCA was not about one enemy or one scenario. It was about flexibility, covering Luzon, the Visayas, Mindanao, and the country's most exposed maritime flank.
EDCA is often misunderstood as a war-fighting agreement alone. In reality, its scope is broader and more human. One pillar is interoperability, making sure Filipino and American forces can actually operate together in real crises, not just on paper. Another is humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, a critical need in one of the world's most disaster-prone countries, where typhoons arrive more reliably than geopolitics. At the same time, EDCA quietly fixes things militaries need but rarely talk about publicly: longer runways, hardened hangars, fuel storage, and logistics nodes. These upgrades serve Philippine forces first, but they also ensure that if a regional crisis erupts, at sea or in the air, response time is measured in hours, not weeks. Seen this way, EDCA is less about preparing for war and more about not being caught unprepared. It reflects a shared judgment by Manila and Washington that in today's Indo-Pacific, deterrence, disaster response, and credibility all start with one basic question: can you move fast enough when it matters? In February 2023,
what better example of that Filipino nobility of spirit could there be than what was once again demonstrated in the last worldwide crisis, where our men and women rose to the challenge of facing an unseen enemy, a new global challenge.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed off on 4 additional EDCA locations, and the timing mattered. This was not a routine bureaucratic update. It came as pressure mounted in the South China Sea. Military flights around Taiwan increased, and regional planners began asking uncomfortable questions about response time. The rationale was simple and sober. Geography leaves little margin for delay. By widening access points, the Philippines reduced its strategic blind spots and signaled that deterrence starts with being in the right place before a crisis breaks out.
Located at the northern tip of Luzon, Naval Base Camilo Osias looks directly toward Taiwan across the Luzon Strait. This is not symbolic positioning, it is operational reality. Any air or naval movement between the Pacific and the South China Sea passes nearby. Access here shortens reaction time and strengthens maritime awareness in a corridor planners quietly describe as unavoidable in a Taiwan contingency. Lalo Airport adds air mobility to the northern equation. Its value lies in speed, the ability to move personnel, equipment, and relief supplies quickly into northern Luzon. In military terms, it supports rapid deployment. In civilian terms, it doubles as a lifeline when disasters hit a region often exposed to typhoons. Dual use is not an afterthought here, it is the point. Set inland in northeastern Luzon, Camp Melchor de la Cruz anchors the eastern defense posture. It provides depth, space to stage, train, and sustain operations away from the coast. Strategically, it connects northern access points with central Luzon, ensuring that defense planning is not compressed into a narrow coastal strip. Perhaps the most geopolitically sensitive site, Balabac Island sits near some of the South China Sea's most contested waters and critical sea lanes. Control of awareness here matters not just for military operations, but for trade routes that carry energy and goods across Southeast Asia. From Balabac, the map stops being abstract and starts looking like daily reality for fishermen, patrol crews, and shipping traffic. These 4 sites tell a clear story. They are not clustered, not redundant, and not accidental. They form a quiet arc, from Taiwan-facing waters in the north to contested sea lanes in the west, designed to give the Philippines and its allies options instead of ultimatums. In today's Indo-Pacific, that flexibility is not escalation, it is insurance. At the strategic level, EDCA is less about troop numbers and more about signaling. By dispersing access across multiple locations, the alliance complicates adversary planning at a time of rising pressure in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. Deterrence today is conveyed through positioning and readiness, not rhetoric. The intent, repeatedly emphasized by U.S. officials, is prevention, discouraging crises before they erupt, rather than responding after lives are already at risk. EDCA's impact is most visible during joint exercises. Drills such as Balikatan now use EDCA sites to practice amphibious, air assault, coastal defense, and rapid logistics operations. Filipino and U.S. forces train as integrated units, building habits and trust under realistic conditions. Infrastructure is the quiet backbone of the agreement. By the end of FY 2023, the United States had planned over $100 million in upgrades across EDCA locations, runways, fuel storage, hardened facilities, and logistics hubs. These improvements remain with the armed forces of the Philippines and deliver civilian benefits as well, from local jobs to faster disaster response. A runway built for military transport is the same runway that receives relief aircraft after typhoons. Equally important is what EDCA is not. There are no permanent U.S. bases, no exclusive zones, and no foreign command. Forces rotate, equipment moves, and sovereignty stays with Manila. Officials on both sides consistently stress this point because it goes to the core of national dignity. As briefings often state, these are Philippine bases, first and last. Inside the Philippines, EDCA has never been a purely military discussion. It is a deeply emotional one. Supporters within the defense establishment argue that access agreements are a practical response to a harsher security environment, not a surrender of sovereignty. Critics, however, see a familiar risk: entanglement in conflicts that Filipinos did not choose, particularly scenarios involving Taiwan or great power rivalry. Civil society groups and activists have called for stronger legislative oversight and broader public debate, reflecting a national instinct shaped by history. Alliances are acceptable, but only when autonomy is visibly protected. This tension is not weakness. It is a democracy negotiating its own red lines. For Manila, the alliance with the United States is not just about deterrence. It is about catching up. The armed forces of the Philippines have long faced capability gaps compared to regional peers, especially in air defense, maritime awareness, and joint operations. Deeper engagement brings exposure to advanced training, modern logistics standards, and operational planning that would take decades to develop alone. For many policymakers, EDCA is less about choosing sides and more about ensuring the country is not strategically naked in an unforgiving neighborhood. From Washington's perspective, the EDCA expansion fits squarely within its broader Indo-Pacific strategy: deter coercion, uphold maritime norms, and reassure allies that U.S. commitments are not seasonal. Beijing's reaction has been consistent and sharp. Chinese officials have criticized EDCA expansions as containment under another name, warning that they risk militarizing the region and undermining peace. State media has framed the sites as potential triggers in a crisis, even as Manila and Washington stress their defensive and humanitarian purpose. The contrast highlights a deeper divide. While China views expanded access through a zero-sum lens, the Philippines frames it as insurance against uncertainty, not preparation for confrontation. Across Southeast Asia, reactions have been quieter but no less attentive. Fellow ASEAN members are watching closely, aware that what happens in the Philippines could shape norms for the entire region. Many governments share the same balancing instinct: maintain economic ties with China, preserve security cooperation with the United States, and avoid being forced into binary choices. Publicly, the emphasis remains on peace, stability, and freedom of navigation, language that reflects both caution and realism.
Beyond Southeast Asia, the EDCA expansion has reassured other U.S. allies. Partners such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia see the move as confirmation that alliance networks in Asia are tightening, not fraying. In a region where credibility is measured by presence, EDCA sends a quiet but unmistakable message. Coordination is deepening, not retreating.
For ordinary Filipinos, EDCA's most immediate relevance may have nothing to do with war. The country sits squarely in the path of typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic activity. EDCA sites provide staging grounds for rapid humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Airfields that can receive heavy-lift aircraft, storage for emergency supplies, and logistics hubs that cut response times when hours matter. In past disasters, delays cost lives. Planners see EDCA as a way to make "never again" more than a slogan.
If I can, up on top of these hills, around 600 meters.
Beyond national borders, these sites enhance cooperation in search and rescue, environmental response, and regional emergency coordination. Oil spills, maritime accidents, and large-scale evacuations do not respect sovereignty lines. EDCA's dual-use nature allows military coordination to support civilian outcomes, quietly reinforcing stability without escalation. Despite official assurances, concerns persist at the local level. Some community leaders worry that foreign troop rotations could bring security risks, political backlash, or make their areas symbolic targets. Even when sovereignty is legally intact, perception matters. Managing local consent remains one of EDCA's most delicate challenges. Sites near Taiwan and contested maritime zones inevitably attract scrutiny. Critics argue that proximity itself creates risk, that in a major power confrontation, geography could pull the Philippines into events beyond its control. Supporters counter that absence of preparation would be even more dangerous. This debate cuts to the heart of national strategy, whether distance or readiness offers greater safety. Perhaps the hardest task is diplomatic. China remains one of the Philippines' largest trading partners and an unavoidable economic actor. Manila must walk a narrow path, deepening security ties with Washington while keeping channels with Beijing functional. EDCA does not eliminate this balancing act, it sharpens it. The addition of 4 new EDCA sites marks a decisive moment in the U.S.-Philippines defense cooperation. It strengthens deterrence, improves preparedness, and expands the alliance's ability to respond to both security crises and natural disasters. As great power competition continues to shape the Indo-Pacific, EDCA will remain central to how the Philippines protects itself without surrendering autonomy. The agreement is no longer just a legal framework. It is a living test of alliance management in a contested region. Ultimately, EDCA tells a broader story. Long-standing alliances do not stay frozen in time, they adapt. In the Philippines case, that adaptation blends strategic realism with historical memory, seeking protection without submission, partnership without permanence, and stability in a region where uncertainty is the only constant. If you like the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.
So I'm a flight surgeon for the 13th Fighter Squadron in Misawa Air Base. So I was originally born in the Philippines in an area called Cavite.
Stand together to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open, that we can step in immediately and work together. And so we've been working on that through both Cape Thunder and Bala Katan.
The United States military presence in the Philippines is more than a historical relic. It serves as a strategic pivot in one of the world's most disputed areas. With a renewed emphasis on combating China's expanding influence in the South China Sea, the United States has re-established its presence at several critical bases in the Philippines. These stations, which range from Luzon to Palawan, are essential components of a larger strategy aimed at safeguarding freedom of navigation, strengthening regional security, and maintaining a balance of power in the region. Let's get into the specifics of where these bases are and why they matter. The United States and the Philippines have maintained a strong relationship, often described as a special relationship, rooted in the Philippines' history as an American colony from 1898 to 1946. Diplomatic relations between the two nations were formally established in 1946. This close bond is supported by deep historical and cultural ties, shared democratic values, and a robust security alliance underpinned by the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. This treaty remains a cornerstone of the two countries' defense cooperation. The U.S.-Philippine Bilateral Strategic Dialogue, BSD, is an annual forum for strategic discussions, covering all facets of the relationship. The people-to-people ties are particularly strong, with over 4 million Filipino Americans living in the United States and nearly 400,000 Americans residing in the Philippines, including many military veterans. Manila is home to the only Veterans Administration regional office outside the United States and hosts the Manila American Cemetery, the largest American military cemetery outside U.S. borders. In 2023, more than 900,000 Americans visited the Philippines. Various exchange programs further strengthen this bond, including the world's longest-running Fulbright program, the International Visitor Leadership Program, and the Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative. Over 9,000 Filipino alumni of U.S. exchange programs reside in the Philippines, while 1,000 U.S. citizens have participated in exchange programs there.